Right.
So today, we're going to start start and finish the topic of kashrut of an oven and a microwave. I sent you the sources beforehand.
Right.
As you could probably see if you look at it, I didn't send many sources. I just wanted to go over the basic terms just to know them, and then we can see the main halachot. As we can guess, the question, people come to the rabbi and ask him, what is the halacha? And the rabbi will say, well, it's a machloket, it's an argument. So as you can guess, many of the topics we'll discuss today, there's arguments about them. The psika I go by, generally speaking, is a book called Pninei Halacha. It's found also in Hebrew and also in English. I wrote this Rabbi Eliezer Melamed from Israel, a very known posek. Actually, I learned in his yeshiva, and his students tell me he hardly leaves his town where he lives. He hardly leaves it since he is busy learning the halachot that he writes about, and to write the book. So he's really devoted into the halacha. So quite a few of the halachot are based on him. I just want to make my kids quiet just for one moment. There's good things for having shurim on Zoom. It's convenient.
Yeah.
Other things in your house and when your kids talk, so you can hear them talking. Okay, so that's the topic of today. Let's share the screen and start the screen. Okay, so last week, what did we learn last week? Last week we learned, just to differentiate, we learned about parv being cooked after meat or milk. Okay, so parv being cooked after meat or milk. And that is the main thing we saw last week. We'll just go over it in 1 minute. We said that when a parv thing is cooked after meat or milk, so if flavor moves from the meat to the pot, and then from the pot, if it's clean, afterwards to the dish, pasta or fish or whatever it is, so it's already called it's a very weak taste, and we call it not in the halacha terms nat barnat. Okay, we said that this fish or pasta, whatever it is, it can be warmed up or eaten on dairy dishes. There's no need to wait 6 hours before eating this fish. If it was the opposite, like if it was cooked, this fish cooked in a meat pot, we don't need to wait 6 hours after eating it. And we just saw an argument whether lechatchila can we eat this pasta together with milk or no, and we differentiated according to the Ashkenazi psika. We differentiated between two main options. One, the pot wasn't used for the last 24 hours. If something was, the pot was used for meat in the last 24 hours, and then we said, lechatchila, you shouldn't mix the pasta, let's say afterwards, with meat, with milk. Let's say I made chicken soup. I took out the chicken soup, cleaned the pot, cooked pasta. This pasta lechatchila shouldn't be eaten with yellow cheese, but if already it was mixed up, so I can eat it. That was one option we said. The other option, the pot was not used for the last 24 hours for meat. I made chicken soup 2 days ago. The last 2 days, this pot has been in the cupboard. And now I cooked pasta inside it. So no problem, lechatchila, I can take this pasta and mix it up with yellow cheese, eat it up with yellow cheese. That is what we learned the last week. And we also mentioned that when I bake parv in the same oven after meat, assuming the oven is clean, so it's the same as what we just mentioned now. What are you going to learn today? Okay, oven and microwave. So first, last week we mentioned parv and being cooked after. Okay, this week we're going to discuss parv together, or meat and milk one after each other. Okay, so I'll give a few examples. I bake a pound cake inside my meat oven. Okay, sometimes you see people in the community when you have, especially now on COVID, and you get kiddush in a box. Okay, so you get kiddush in a box to your door, and it says there on this cake was baked in a meat oven. Okay, so are you allowed to eat it with milk or no? Okay, so usually, by the way, it's baked after meat. You don't bake it together with meat. Let's give an answer now based on what we learned last week. Okay, if I bake the cake in a parv oven, I baked the cake in a meat oven. Based on what we learned last week, can I eat this cake together with a cup of coffee? Okay, so we have here the answer from last week. If it's one after each other, so yes, you can eat it with a cup of coffee, especially if the oven wasn't used in the last 24 hours for meat. Okay, but what happens if we bake chicken at the same time together with cake? It's just before Shabbos and we are busy in time. We put the parv cake together with the chicken. Okay, or a dairy quiche with a post roast happen together to be at the same time. So that could be questions. And a question in a microwave, and that could be very common, a question in a microwave. Can I warm up, especially if you have only one microwave, or if you are on a road trip and you have only one microwave, can you warm up meat after milk, or the opposite, in the same oven? Or generally speaking, what do I do in a road trip with a microwave? What do we do with it? We'll get to it today. Okay, so the terms, we'll see two main terms plus another thing. And as I mentioned, we will not go deep into them. The idea is just to know the terms. So if we hear them somewhere, we'll be familiar with them, and then to go to the practical answers. So the first term is called reicha, which means smell. The second term is ze'ah, which is sweat, or in our language will be steam, or edim if you're Hebrew. And then a question, can taste transfer from pot to pot? And that could be a very common question. I'm cooking now for Shabbos. I have on the stove 2 pots. One is meat, one is dairy. The pots touch each other. Okay, food didn't move from each other, but just the pots touched each other. Is this a problem or no? And that could actually also have very many relevant examples, and we'll see as we go. So let's start from the first term, smell, reicha. Okay, smell. Once, I'm sure all of us, somewhere there in our life, we had a cold and our nose was blocked. And we noticed that when our nose is blocked, also our taste changes. And yet, it's true, a lot of our taste is based on smell. That's why in cola and other things, and Coke and sodas and other foods, so they also add smelling essence and not just taste essence, because our smell influences our taste. And there's an argument already in the Gemara, and then it continues to the Rishonim. Is smell considered something? Or in the language of the Gemara, reicha miltai, is smell considered something or no? And so we'll just let Adina join us. So the question is smell considered, is it something we take care about in the halach? Okay, and I'll skip 2 slides and then I'll go back one. The poskim deal with quite a few different questions. Is there a difference between a big oven and a small oven? Obviously, in a big oven, the smell disappears more. Does the oven have an opening? If the oven has an opening, like most ovens we have today, so also the smells disappears. Is the food spicy or fatty? Maybe spicy food absorbs the smell differently, or fatty food absorbs the smell differently. So the rabbis discuss these issues and many other issues. We can say maybe on COVID, we can know that smell is so important during COVID times, because one of the things that happened to people, some of the people that have COVID, coronavirus, they can't smell. So can and also taste. So we know that it's important. Things, smell and taste, are very much connected to each other. So as I said, we won't go deeply into all of these topics. I just wanted to give the general idea, a general term to know it, And the Shulchan Aruch says, he refers to lechatchila. Okay, lechatchila, we view smell as something which is important, which means we don't want a kosher food to receive a smell of a non-kosher food, and the opposite. We don't want meat to receive the smell of milk, or milk to receive the smell of meat. Okay, that's lechatchila. The ebed sometimes is permitted. Okay, but the ebed many times is probably permitted, and the Shulchan Aruch continues that if the food is covered, if one of the food is covered, even if it's just with dough, so it's permitted. For example, in borekas, okay, borekas we have the cheese inside, buried inside the dough. So this cheese doesn't give smell of cheese out because something is covering up this cheese. However, the Rama says that some authorities are stringent about smell, and only in very specific cases they say it's mutar. But as I said, we are going now into the details. The main thing we want to know is that lechatchila we view as smell as something that we care about it. And if a kosher food absorbs smell of a non-kosher food, lechatchila we don't want this to happen. Another important thing you should know from here, and that is important, covering one of the foods, doesn't matter which one, the kosher one or the non-kosher one, the meat or the milk, covering one of them solves the problem of smell. Okay, and covering, we'll see it a few times in the class today, so covering is important. Okay, for example, if we have in those big olden ovens, I put inside them a chulent dish, and I put inside it also a dairy quiche. Since the chulent is covered, obviously the smell still goes out. It's not considered a very strong smell. It's not a strong enough smell in the halach terms to cause a problem. So as soon as one of the foods is covered, there's no smell, and this is an important thing to know. Okay, so before we go to the next term, what it's important to know from here, we don't want smells to be absorbed, but as soon as we cover one of the foods, so we solve this problem.
I have a question, actually. Yeah. With the when you cover it with dough, okay, yeah. So then how can you eat the dough, because the dough itself was directly exposed to both the dairy and the meat?
Both the dairy and the meat. That's true.
So it works as a cover to protect the meat from being exposed to the dairy, but since it's acting as the cover once it's baked, you know, how can you eat
that's a very good question, and it goes maybe to the next topic. Let's say the dough is on the quiche. Let's say, okay, the dough is on the quiche, on the dairy quiche, and next to it there's a pot of meat. Okay, now the meat isn't touching the quiche. Okay, the only way the meat can touch the quiche is by the smell. Okay, if the meat will touch the quiche, so you're right. If the meat touches the dough, so you're right. But the meat isn't really touching it. It's only a problem of smell. And as we, from the beginning already, we see smell as something. It has something, but yet we understand it's not the real food. And since it's not the real food, so maybe the smell of the meat is absorbed inside the dough. Okay, and the dough itself got flavor from the milk. Okay, but there's no. But the smell, which is from the beginning, isn't something so strong, wasn't absorbed in milk itself. It was absorbed in something which receives the taste of milk. Okay, it's not in milk itself. But it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, just a good question. It helps us to point out the difference between smell and actual flavor. Okay, because you're right. If actual flavor of meat would touch the dough, which also touches the quiche, then we have a problem. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so here's the bottom line. One of the foods was covered, there's no problem of smell. There might be other problems we'll see later, okay? Otherwise, not to do lechatchila if it happens. So ask Rabbi, in many cases, it will be permitted. Okay, as I said, we're going to take an overview of it. Next topic is steam or zayah. Okay, steam or zayah. The question is exactly when we have steam. When do we have steam? As beforehand, I'm going to a few topics that is discussed in the halacha. Okay, the halacha of steam only in liquids or also in solids. We all know from when we bake that when we bake cake, there's usually less steam than having a pot full of water. Makes sense after all. And also, steam from a cake doesn't consist the flour of the cake and other ingredients. So that's a question the person discuss. Another question is, if I bake something, do I assume there's steam automatically, or I say no, maybe there's no steam and I see it? So there's a question here: was the steam mixed up or no? And in today's oven, especially in the ovens that the heating is on the top, does a steam burn in today's ovens? Okay, when the heating is on the bottom, especially when we're talking about the olden times where they had the fire and everything's above the fire, so maybe the steam goes and has chance to go to food. But when we have a heating source which is so strong and it's above the food, maybe everything that goes there already will be burnt before it will have any time to do something. As I said, these questions, like other more questions, are discussed in the halacha, and today our goal is just to see the general term of it, and then a few things of the halacha in mind. So going to the Shulchan Aruch and the Rama, in case you want to go in to see them, so most of the sources are from two simanim in the Shulchan Aruch. It's from 92 Tzadik Bet and from Kufchet in the book of Yoredah. The Shulchan Aruch writes, okay, and that we'll read it inside, a pan of milk placed in an oven underneath a pot of meat. We have here a direct way of steam going right into the pot above it of meat. So the steam rises, enters into the pot, and renders it so it's forbidden. Okay, so here we have a direct way of steam going into the pot. We mentioned yesterday, and maybe we'll do a question of today, what do we do with today's pots? But when you read Gemarot and Rishonim, it's so obvious that the olden pots really used to absorb the taste. You really used to absorb the taste, and in big quantities. In big quantities, the Gemara I just saw today, the Gemara in Masechet Pesachim, people, you or your husband are learning the Daf Yomi that will reach it in 2 weeks more or less. The Gemara says, we can see this pot of clay, we can see how it absorbs the food and how it afterwards takes out. Okay, it's something that you used to be able to see in the eyes, which is different than the pots today. We still keep the laws of as it used to be probably 100 years ago, but just we should know how the taste actually really did move into different by the pots. Today, only some pots move the taste. Some of the cast irons, some of the plastics can really move the taste, and some of them today are known to be fine. For example, glass, according to many authorities. Okay, that's just an anyway. So the Shulchan Aruch writes that direct steam that goes from one thing to another thing, is a problem. Okay, so we are talking here about meat underneath milk or opposite. Okay, and the Rama, he writes that all of this is when the pan is open and the steam rises up from the food itself, okay, to the pan that is above it. Okay, so the main problem we have with steam is we have a direct connection between the food and the steam, or the food and the pot above it. So a very common example will be, okay, let's say it's before Shabbos, and I'm in a rush, and I'm baking now chicken inside the oven. I take a pan of fish and put this on top of the chicken. By the way, if we mentioned Reicha, we mentioned smell. Just from a culinary point of view, it's not so recommended to do it. Okay, not so recommended to do. It does absorb the smell. Okay, it does absorb the smell, and you'll get a flavor of chicken in the fish and the opposite. So it's not so recommended to do. But let's say you're in a rush, it's winter, and we almost have Shabbos. So according to here, the fish above will be fleshy, will be meaty. Okay, you can't eat the fish afterwards with milk. It really will be meaty. Another thing the Rama says, that the steam needs to be hot. The steam needs to be hot. This is quite relevant, actually, probably more relevant than what we think. We all have salt, and we use salt to put in our foods. Okay, and how do we put salt in our foods? Well, we open the pot, take the salt, and shake it in. But then 1 second, hey, we're taking salt, which is part, and we are shaking it above a meat pot. Afterwards, in just a few minutes, we'll be taking the same salt and shaking it into milk. Isn't that a problem? So you can see here from the right, if it's close to the food, it's so hot the hand will move away. So it's a problem. It's not so hot. Usually when we shake salt, we don't put our hands so close to the food, so it's not a problem. We should make sure not to put the salt or any other spices too close to the food, because in a few minutes we'll be using it for milk. That's just more of a halacha than what we think. Many times it's not such a problem, it's just something to know. However, so what we can see from here, if we summarize this idea of steam actually can be a problem. Steam does transfer taste, and everyone who steams broccoli or greens can see how the water underneath it becomes green, and we can see how steam does transfer taste. We view it as something as if just regular cooking, but the same as we saw beforehand with smell. If it's covered, there's no steam. Okay, if it's covered, there's no steam. The steam is to be direct. If it's covered, there's no steam. Of course, there'll be a bit of steam coming out, but the halacha view it as something which we really take care. Usually something that doesn't transfer enough taste. Okay, so let's say if we go back to the case we talked beforehand, I'm baking chicken and I have fish inside it. If I cover the chicken so the fish doesn't absorb the steam from the chicken. We saw here twice already that covering solves problem. Covering solves the problem, and in just when we get to the relevant halacha, that covering is something which, especially when we go out, hotels and other places, covering solves many problems. Can taste be transferred between two dry pots? Okay, this is also a common question. Maybe one of the comments I have, I'm cooking by mistake, I put two pots next to each other. One has chicken soup, one has milk inside. Is it a problem or no? Another problem that can happen sometimes. I baked pizza on an oven tray, then I baked chicken on an aluminum tray, but I placed the chicken, the tray of the chicken above the pizza tray of the pizza. Maybe the most common thing can be that in the microwave. That's the most common thing in the microwave. In the microwave, we have the plate of the microwave, and also adults. Sometimes we're lazy to get plates. But especially when you have children in the house, and if your children are still young, so just wait and see. Okay, instead of waiting and taking a plate, so they might take just borekas and just roll it on the glass plate and warm it up. Okay, and then afterwards, they might take also a plate, might take something else and just throw it on this glass plate and warm it up. Okay, and that's what adults tend to do, and kids for sure tend to do. So let's say they warmed something up they warmed the milk, okay, on this plate. Can I now warm meat on the plate? Okay, if milk spilled on this plate and boiling milk, can you warm up kosher things like meetings on this plate? Or if we go into a hotel, and let's say I have a container and the container is covered. Okay, so there's no steam, there's nothing, but the plate of the microwave isn't kosher, and my kosher container is touching the non-kosher plate, because in a hotel, who knows what happened in the hotel? Okay, so let's say I put my food in a kosher container, that's fine. But it's touching the non-kosher container. That's a great question. What do we do with it? And luckily, we have a very simple answer. Okay, luckily, we have a very simple answer. The Rama says, based on a few Rishonim, that generally speaking, it's a general rule. Food doesn't transfer, or taste doesn't transfer between two dry containers. Okay, so I have two pots. One is meat, one is milk. They're touching each other. There's no problem. We have the plate of the microwave, and in the hotel, and I put it on that my container. So although my container is touching the non-kosher microwave, it's fine. Food doesn't transfer from between two containers or two pots, just like that, without anything in between. And this is as I said, in the last year, I think I met this out of my house. I met this halacha quite a few times. So it's a very important halacha to know. After this, okay, we have here about a question of a meat pot on a pizza pan. Okay, let's say I have a pizza pan, I baked pizza on it. I took out the pan. Now the pan is clean, and I put the meat container on it. again, it's the same thing. Since there's two pans, two containers, taste does not transfer between them. This is the three basics that we saw. So we saw that reicha, we saw what smell is, we saw we shouldn't refrain from transferring smell from food to food, but the air sometimes it's going to be fine. We saw that covering the food solves the problem of smell. We saw about steam, sweat. That could be really a problem, but again, covering can be a very good solution. And we saw about dry things with dry pans, and said there's no problem of taste moving from one to each other with clean pans. And now you can go and answer the practical questions. As you can see, we have very good solutions. So what about if you use the microwave, okay, for meat and milk? If it's at the same time and uncovered, it's a problem. Okay, why is it a problem? It's also smell. Okay, we have also steam. It comes up, goes down. We can see the steam in the microwave. Okay, it's a very small area. That's a problem. Okay, use it at the same time. Hopefully, not to do it if something happens. But what if we do one after each other? Okay, with dairy in Israel, we had only one microwave. Okay, and what do we do? I go to a hotel. I have only one. What do I do? So if one of the foods, dairy or meat is always covered and plate is clean, there's no problem. Okay, why is that? Smell can be transferred only at the same time. Food at the same time. Steam can be transferred only if it's not covered. Okay, so if I cover one of the foods, there's no steam. I can go back into it. And if dish touches the plate, there's not a problem. As we said, if the plate is clean, there's no problem. A kosher plate is allowed to touch a non-kosher plate. Okay, so covering the foods in the microwave is a very good solution. It's a very good solution. You go to a hotel, you see this microwave, it's very easy to cache a microwave in the moment. But if you cover your food there, you're fine. How do we cache a microwave? It's super easy. You clean the microwave, usually in a hotel will be clean. You take a cup of water, put inside a bit of soap, stir it on maximum strength 3 minutes, and that's it. Cache. Not all microwaves can be cached like this. Only microwaves without, what's the name of it? Heating, how do you call it? Some microwaves have a heating system in it. I'm not sure those microwaves are called. But if a microwave has a heating system in it, usually it's fine to Kashrut. And then the solution is simple. As we said here, you want to warm up something that's a microwave, very simple. Cover the food you want to warm up. Okay, cover the food. That's a very simple solution. Just cover the food and that's it. You solve the problem. How can I bake in a non-kosher oven? Okay, how can I bake in a non-kosher oven? Let's say you go to your Airbnb and it's late before Shabbos. You don't have time to kosher the oven. Okay, so cover the food. Okay, cover the food. Put 2 layers of tin foil. Usually, it's better to put 2 layers of tin foil. Many times, one is enough. Just put 2 layers of tin foil. One should cover also the bottom, everything, and it's fine. Wrote already here. By the way, to kosher the oven is also not so hard. You put it at the maximum heat for about half an hour. For some authorities, a few minutes. And you kosher the oven. We'll get to koshering later. Okay. So anyway, so baking in a non-kosher oven, as soon as you cover the food inside the oven, better to have 2 coverings, so everything is fine. Okay, and that's about the oven. But the event, what happens if I put? I started writing the slide, so I didn't finish writing the slide. If I put meat and milk in the same oven, okay, so meat and milk at the same oven will be a problem. Okay, if they're both at the same time. But, and here it's important, if it's one after each other, okay, one after each other, and here there'll be an argument between the rabbis. I'm going by Rabbi Eliezer, who has a lot of base to what he's saying. If I bake by mistake, and mistakes happen, okay, I have my meat oven, I made a quiche for Shabbos, okay, my husband, not my husband, I mean, usually men tend to have more mistakes by it. Now I can say it as a man. I have a friend in Israel who his wife, when she was pregnant, she had twins. So for 2 or 3 months, and took her time to get pregnant. Anyway, for 2 or 3 months, she wasn't allowed to go out. She wasn't allowed to do so many things. And when that period of time, so he asked me many questions. What happened? By mistake, I took the millk cover and put it on the fleshik pot. All sorts of questions I had to him. He had, it happens by mistake. I said to him, I have for you a very simple solution. Ask your wife to go back to the kitchen. It will solve all of your mistaking. Just because men sometimes tend to have more mistakes, and that I don't know why. But anyway, if we had a mistake, okay, and we put by mistake meat after milk, okay, after milk, okay. But so let's see what problems we have here. Reicha, the smell we said can happen only if it's at the same time. Okay, smell is only if it's at the same time. So what problem we have? We have problem of sweat, okay, of ze'ah, of sweat. But we have here two things to take into account. When the Ramah spoke about sweat or steam, okay, or steam, so he was referring to something which happens at the same time. Okay, we have a direct connection between the steam and the pot above it. Okay, between the milk and the meat above it, direct connection. Here it's one after each other. There's no direct connection. Another thing to take into account, in a covering of a pot, there's a very close connection. In an oven, there's no close connection between the steam and what we're cooking inside it. And another thing we should take into account, the walls of the oven are hot. And maybe all the steam that goes into the oven already burns. And the last thing we should take into account, okay, let's say, I put inside my dairy oven, by mistake, I put chicken. Okay, great. So steam came out from the chicken to the oven. How much of that steam came back into the oven? It's not, the steam spreads around. How much of the steam came back? And the answer will be probably a very small amount. Therefore, many poskim say, b'di'eved, the food is kosher. Okay, b'di'eved, when we have a mistake, and by accident we put meat after milk or the opposite, so b'di'eved, the food is kosher. The oven should be kashrut. Okay, and to kashrut an oven is quite easy. We learn about it, we mentioned it before, and then we'll learn about it later. The oven should be kashrut, but the food, b'di'eved, is kosher. And that's the basic halachot we learned up to now. I'll leave a few minutes for questions, if there's any questions. So b'simcha. And if not, so we can say Chanukah Sameach for tomorrow night.
I have another question, actually. If you have two pots in the oven at the same time, and the food is pariv in both of them, but it's a dairy pot and a meat pot, is that a problem?
Oh, okay. So that's again a very interesting question.
Hi, Mick, come get your shot.
And the answer will be that it's fine. Okay, the answer will be it's fine. If we have, let's say, we shouldn't do it. We try not to mix up. We try not to mix up between things. Okay, so just to make sure we aren't causing problems. In the oven, we'll put at the same time only meat, only dairy, only meat pots, only dairy pots. But let's look at it a bit closer. And that connects a bit to what we learned last week. If both things are parv, just the pot of one of them is dairy and the pot of one of them is meat, okay? Let's even say the pots touch each other, okay? So we learned today, pots don't transfer taste from each other just by touching. They need to have something in between. And here the something in between is so distant, in last week terms, it was not barnat, okay? Something which transfers taste and another transferring taste and another transferring taste. So it is fine. Let's think about it. Just, man, gosh, maybe it's easier to draw it. But the dairy dish, okay, it got taste from milk which was cooked beforehand. And now it needs to transfer the taste of the milk into the parv rice inside it. And this parv rice needs to cause steam. And then the steam needs to go into the meat container. So it's so many transformations. That's already fine. Hey, it's an interesting question. It's already fine. If you put in the same time in the oven a meat container and a non-meat and a dairy container, and both of them have parv things inside, so it's fine. There's no problem at all.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah.
Suppose you have a meat oven and you're baking bread, you know, challah, some challah rolls, whatever in the oven, but there's nothing else in the oven except the challah. Can you take those challah rolls and serve them at a dairy meal?
That's an interesting question. And the answer will be yes. Okay, the answer will be yes. The answer will be yes. And
can you repeat the question?
What?
Can you repeat?
Yeah, the question is like this. The question is like this. I have a meat oven. Okay, I have a meat oven, and I bake challah inside this meat oven. Okay, and I'm assuming that the oven is clean, like most ovens.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the oven is clean. That connects to the halacha we learned last week called nat barnat, which means noten ta'am, bar noten ta'am. What do I mean? The oven absorbed taste, absorbed taste from the meat. And then somehow it needs to find a way to transfer the taste to the challah. We have here two transmissions, from the meat to the oven, and from the oven to the challah.
Yeah.
That's already two transmissions. In two transmissions, it's already called not banat, and if it was already mixed with milk, so we can have it, we can eat it with milk. Here we have even two more reasons to be a bit more lenient, and the two reasons are as follows. Does challah have steam? Challah is very solid. Does challah have steam? Does it have enough steam? How does the taste from the oven go into the challah? There's nothing really that can connect the challah and the oven. That will be one reason to be makel in it. Another reason is usually before you bake challah, you preheat the oven, right? Usually.
Yeah.
And not in all cases, but many cases, this preheating it's like kashering the oven. Not in all cases. Don't write it down. Not in all cases, but in some cases, especially in this case where we have so many reasons to be lenient in it.
Yeah.
So you can eat the challah in a dairy meal. Now I know there'll be some rabbis that will say no. I can understand them. And I actually argued here in Memphis with a few rabbis, but in the end, the bottom line is maybe just to try not to mix up between things. So I shouldn't do it lechatchila. I shouldn't take the oven, which I just a moment ago baked meat, and now bake challah in it. We didn't do it. In my house, by the way, so my wife always waits 24 hours between baking meat and baking challah, and we plan the baking according to that, and then she preheats the oven, and only then she bakes challah. This is because we want to know there's no other problems. But really, if you're asking me, can those challahs eat and be in a dairy meal? So the answer will be yes. The answer will be yes. And just again, if you know you want to bake challah for a dairy meal, if you already know you want to do it, so just before you bake the challah, or wait 24 hours, or preheat the oven to kashrut, and then bake the challah.
Okay, and one more question about like when you started at the beginning. Suppose you take fish and meat in the same oven, right? But the fish is covered, right? The meat can be covered or not covered. I don't care. So I know there's steam maybe coming from the meat, but not from the fish because the fish is covered.
Yeah.
All right. So when you eat that fish, you don't have to wait 6 hours before you can have millk, right?
Yeah.
The fish isn't considered meat.
Right.
Because it was covered and, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not considered meat. You don't have to wait six hours. Here, in this case, since it was really baked at the same time, I personally wouldn't eat it with milk. I personally.
Yeah.
If you really try to find reasons and you want to go deeper, you may be, but I wouldn't eat it together with you. But you don't have to wait 6 hours.
Yeah, right. I wasn't not together, but I'm asking about if you had to wait.
Yeah, so you don't have to wait. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. Just one word about next week.